You know, I've asked you questions about what happens when you apply the concept of slip flow. But what does that really mean? How do you harness the concept?
Yeah, okay, so what it really boils down to, it just gives you an acceleration of your flow rate. And so if you were to ask me 5 years ago, actually I wanted to use half-micron particles 5 years ago. If you were to ask me then, I would have told you that we would have to use short column lengths, like 2 centimeter, 1 centimeter, 2 centimeter column lengths in order to get adequate flow rates. And then cross our fingers that the instrument doesn't wash away all of our improvement in efficiency. But as it turns out, slip flow gives us this ability to work with just normal column lengths. We can use 5 centimeter columns, which is what we're commercializing. We can even use 10 centimeter column lengths. And so what you observe it as mainly, from a practical point of view, is the ability to gain the efficiency you would expect from really tiny particles and be able to use that with normal column lengths.
So I guess what I'm also trying to ask then is, how is this understanding that you now have informing, say, your method development or your approach to your separations?
Yeah, so to a first approximation, you wouldn't have to do any changes in methods development. You would simply observe it as an improvement in peak shape. But what it now affords you to do is do different methods development because you have sharper peaks. And so to elaborate on that, if you look at the methods that people use, they're often designed to make up for the fact that the column's not very efficient. So for example, in protein separations, you use gradient elution. Now, if you use a fast gradient, it makes your peaks look a lot sharper. And if you use a slow gradient, eventually you can't keep going more slowly. A slower gradient, I should interject, approaches the isocratic limit with really, really slow gradients. And so you don't get this sharpening, this focusing effect anymore. Well, now that your column is more efficient, you can use slower gradients, slower and slower gradients to get better resolution. And so that would be one example of where you would change your methods development. You can now use a slower gradient. Doesn't necessarily mean a slower analysis time, because you can start your gradient out where your first protein is coming out and end it where your last protein comes out to move everything back to, closer to time zero, but work closer to the isocratic limit. And so we're actually doing this in our lab. We're doing new kinds of methods development to take advantage of this much higher efficiency.